Hey guys, tonight we begin our quiet descent into the opulent, smoky corridors of one of the wealthiest and most labyrinthine empires in world history, the Mughal Empire. You're standing, barefoot of course, on the cool sandstone floor of Agra's Red Fort. The moonlight glints off marble pavilions and onion-domed roofs. The air smells faintly of rosewater and something more acrid. Maybe incense, maybe chili. You'll find out. You feel the stillness of the court, the looming hush of guards in jeweled-toned turbans, and the faint shuffle of silk slippers along echoing halls. But don't get too comfortable. The man next to you just got punished for having his mustache trimmed half an inch too short. He's now wearing a tiny bell tied to his upper lip. Yes, his mustache jingles when he talks. You probably won't survive this. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're here, drop your location and local time in the comments. I always love seeing where you're listening from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge slowly into the imperial courtyard, heart fluttering, eyes scanning golden arches and jasmine-draped balconies. You're technically not on trial, but you've been summoned, which in Mughal times might be worse. The guards don't speak. They gesture with sharp jerks of their heads and the occasional thump of a spear butt. You're brought past fountains designed to imitate the sound of rain. Serene. Ironic, given how tense your stomach feels. Why are you here? Because someone reported you didn't bow low enough to a minor minister, or maybe because your shoes squeaked during Friday prayers, or, and this one's common, because you whistled near a mosque. You didn't mean to, but here you are. Under Emperor Akbar, known for being uncommonly tolerant for his time, punishments were often creative rather than brutal. But creativity has its own flavor of cruelty. Take the mustache code, for instance. The empire revered facial hair, particularly large, well-curled mustaches, as a sign of masculinity and honor. If you disgraced yourself, your mustache might be forcibly trimmed. Not shaved off, that would be merciful. Trimmed, awkwardly, unevenly, left to flap like sad foliage in a storm. And to ensure no one missed your humiliation, you'd be fitted with a delicate ring attached to the tip of your mustache, sometimes bells, sometimes dyed threads. Historians still argue whether this was a standardized punishment or more of a local innovation. Either way, you jingled, publicly. A woman walks past you now, adorned with perfume bottles strung like jewelry. Seems glamorous until you notice she's barefoot, head bowed, and bad gossip painted in ink across her forehead. Yes, in Persian script. She insulted the wrong concubine. Her sentence? 10 days of scented servitude, forced to distribute perfume at the market as a warning to others. Ironically, her scent is lovely, but the shame is pungent. You're finally brought before a magistrate, tall, brooding, with an embroidered robe that cost more than your house. He doesn't look up. He's writing something. You try to peer over the desk. It appears to be a poem. Probably bad. You suppress a cough. Punishments in the Mughal Empire weren't designed just to hurt. They were designed to teach. They needed to be remembered, whispered about, retold in marketplaces and tea stalls, like the infamous feather collar, a device resembling a soft neck brace made entirely of peacock feathers. Sounds gentle, right? Except it was soaked in oil that caused itching, non-stop itching. You'd walk through public streets scratching like a man possessed, marked for days as the man who mocked a tax collector. Akbar's son, Jahangir, was slightly more theatrical. He liked to stage court dramas, literal ones, where wrongdoers played themselves. Did you overcharge on grain deliveries? You'd play the greedy merchant in a court play. Audience? The entire court, including the emperor. They'd clap, you'd cry, and then still have to pay a fine. You recall the story of the water seller who urinated in a sacred pond, a foolish move indeed. He was made to carry a carved wooden fish on his head for a month, with the words, "I poison the water," etched into it. You'd think people would be angry. Mostly, they just fed him less. Fringe tidbit: sometimes a cow was used for judgment. In rural courts, if two men disputed land ownership, they might place fruit on each plot and release a sacred cow. Whichever fruit she ate first, her choice determined the rightful owner. Technically fair in a cosmic sense, probably not satisfying if you just lost 5 acres. Historians debate whether these village punishments were endorsed by the imperial court or merely tolerated. But no emperor publicly banned them. The logic seemed to be, if it works and no one bleeds, let it stand. The magistrate finally looks up. He sniffs, raises one eyebrow. You squeaked during prayer? You nod. Not your finest moment. He writes something, hands the paper to a scribe. You're dismissed. No shackles, no feathers, no donkeys. As you leave, you notice a boy being led in. He's got chalk dust in his hair and guilt in his eyes, likely a student who mocked his tutor. You hope his punishment is light, probably something with nose paint or a satirical song. You step into the twilight, the courtyard now filled with music from unseen sitars. A breeze ruffles your clothes, and for a moment, the anxiety lifts. Then you sneeze. A guard turns slowly. Uh-oh.
The guard who turned toward you doesn't speak. He just gestures. 2 fingers flick like a whip, and a smaller guard emerges from the shadows carrying a cloth bundle. You're not taken back into the court this time. No. Your punishment seems to be the fast-track kind. Before you can ask what's happening, they unfurl the bundle with surprising tenderness. Inside, a nose ring. Not golden or jeweled, mind you. This one's iron, crude, and unmistakably humiliating. Worse, it comes with a fabric strip dyed in garish saffron and purple, the colors clashing in the worst way. A small wooden placard is attached, and although you don't get a good look, you spot the word disruptor. You're not pierced, no worries. This is a clip-on. It pinches your nostrils uncomfortably and dangles just below your mouth. The fabric ties behind your ears like a toddler's bonnet. It flaps slightly in the breeze. Dignity out the window. You're marched not to a cell but to the main market square. It's late. The torches crackle in their sconces and vendors are winding down. But a few linger, drawn like moths to the smell of fresh shame. You're told to stand. That's it. Just stand. For 2 hours. In the circle of shame. It's not a literal circle, just a common name for the town's main banyan tree, under which offenders were left on display like poorly made art. A woman next to you wears mismatched shoes and has silver bells on each ear that jingle with every twitch. Her sign reads, "Interrupted a Sufi." That'll do it. The idea here isn't pain, it's exposure. Mughal punishments often targeted pride, ego, social standing, particularly for offenses that were minor but public. You didn't need to be flogged to be broken. Sometimes, being stared at by fishmongers for 2 hours while wearing a wrinkled banner that says, "I am loud when I should be silent," did the job just fine. Historians still argue whether these displays had legal basis or were simply regional improvisations, tolerated as folk justice. Some say Emperor Shah Jahan himself ordered specific humiliation methods for petty offenses. Others believe it was entirely up to local judges or nobles eager to look creative. As you stand there, the guards finally leave, melting into alleyways. You're just scenery now, part of the Mughal backdrop. You watch as a man rides by on a horse wearing what looks like a wedding dress. You blink, look again. Yep, definitely a wedding dress. The horse meanwhile wears garlands of garlic. This was the punishment for a man who broke his marriage contract by lying about his dowry. The bride's family reported him. Now, he must walk the entire city wearing the discarded bridal outfit while holding a goose. Why a goose? No one knows. The goose seems confused, but resigned. Aren't we all? You stifle a laugh, but your iron nose ring clinks on your teeth. Instant regret. Next to you, a boy no older than 12 is whispering something. He leans slightly toward you. I peed on the tulsi plant. Didn't know it was holy. You nod slowly, understanding more about Mughal botanical rules than you'd ever hoped to. A fringe tale emerges from your memory, something you heard while waiting outside the court. The tale of the barber's boy, who insulted a noble's turban and was sentenced to 3 days as a human signpost. His arms were tied to a wooden frame and he was placed at a busy crossroad with directional signs dangling from his elbows. Whenever someone asked for directions, they had to rotate him. Kids thought it was hilarious. His rotator cuffs? Less so. Eventually, your 2 hours expire. A different guard arrives carrying a tiny bell in his palm like a sacred relic. He removes your nose ring, unceremoniously drops it into a bucket labeled "Tomorrow's Offenders," and waves you off. You walk stiffly through the bazaar, trying to forget the glances, the giggles, the vendors who offered you spice discounts for being brave. But then you hear it, that sound. Slow, deliberate, tap, tap, tap. You freeze. Someone's coming up the alley wearing the dreaded shame slippers. These weren't ordinary footwear. Crafted with exaggerated heels and hollow soles, they made a distinct clapping sound with each step, like a goat tap dancing in a marble hallway. They were punishment for eardroppers, loud singers, and unsolicited poets. Yes, the empire had opinions about verse quality. As the man in slippers shuffles past, you catch the red ink on his back. He rapped at the mosque gate. Tough crowd. You make your way toward the city's outer gardens, hoping to avoid further embarrassment. But on the way you pass by one of the empire's public reflection stations. These weren't confession booths or therapy corners, they were flat wooden stages where offenders were invited publicly to reflect on their sins. Out loud, in rhyme, sometimes with musical accompaniment. Occasionally, the crowd clapped. More often, they booed. The worst fate was indifference. A scholar once theorized these reflection stations were an early form of participatory justice. Another claims they were more about entertainment than reform. A third posits they were just Mughal versions of open mic night. Historians still argue, of course. You catch the end of one poor man's reflection. He's halfway through a poem about stealing lentils. He cooked them thrice, but guilt remained, for dal not mine was wrongly gained. The crowd murmurs. One man shouts, "You could have added cumin." Another, "You should have rhymed with strained." He bows, not out of pride but fatigue. The guards give him a loaf of stale bread as a thank you gift and escort him off stage. You keep walking. You've made it through your first full day in the Mughal web of peculiar punishments. No blood, no broken bones, just minor ego bruises and a whole new respect for floral ink and jingling facial accessories. And maybe, just maybe, you'll think twice before sneezing near a court official again.
You wake up the next morning to the squawk of parrots and the distant clang of temple bells. Your joints are stiff, your pride slightly bent, and your stomach, well, your stomach is downright angry. But there's no time for breakfast, because today, you are an audience member for for what might be the most humiliating punishment the Mughal Empire ever devised, the reverse donkey ride. It's exactly what it sounds like, and somehow it's worse. You're escorted by a local lad named Yusuf, who offers running commentary like a cheerful museum guide with a mischievous streak. "You're lucky," he says. "Today it's a full procession. Sometimes we only get tax evaders." You follow the murmuring crowd to the edge of a wide, dusty lane just outside the city's spice district. That's where the spectacle begins. The offender is already mounted, sideways, on a scrawny, long-suffering donkey, but he's not facing forward. No, he's backward, clutching the animal's tail like a sad parody of a ridesman. His robes are turned inside out, his turban is a mess of feathers and ribbons. And to complete the look, he wears a necklace of old sandalwood shoes. You squint at the placard tied to the donkey's flank. "Told lies in a petition." The crowd roars with laughter. Reverse donkey rides were public humiliations reserved for the dishonest, the gossipy, and the overly dramatic. If you exaggerated your misfortunes in front of the court or made false claims against the neighbor, this was your reward. The backward riding symbolized that your story was going the wrong way. Literal puns. Mughal humor was direct. But the show doesn't end there. A man in front of the donkey walks backwards too, holding a mirror. Occasionally, he tilts it up so the offender is forced to see his own ridiculous reflection. Historians still argue whether this practice originated during Emperor Akbar's reign or was imported from Persian courts. Either way, it's undeniably theatrical. You hear a woman behind you whisper, "That mirror guy used to be a drummer. Now he just reflects shame." Sometimes, friends and family were made to walk beside the donkey, carrying signs like, "He's with me," or "I raised this fool." Depending on the crime, they might wear ridiculous hats, like the one shaped like a pickle that's wobbling in the breeze right now. Don't laugh, that could be you next week. One particularly dramatic tale involves a baker who tried to bribe an inspector with stale wheat. When caught, he was made to ride the donkey with bags of hardened flour tied to his ankles for 3 miles, uphill, in the summer. They called it the March of Bread Regret. Fringe tidbit: if the donkey bit you during your ride, which they were known to do, the punishment restarted. The imperial scrolls don't say whether this was a feature or a bug. Yusuf elbows you. "Next up, the chili man." You blink. The crowd shifts again, revealing another unlucky soul. This man is being led down the same route on foot, blindfolded, but his face is red and streaming with tears. Why? Because he's walking through thin trails of smoke, not from firewood, but from roasted green chilies, burning low in iron pans. It hits you as he passes, that acrid sting in your throat, the eye-watering intensity that clings to your nostrils like a jealous lover. "He cheated a spice trader," Yusuf says, "so they gave him the market walk. No jail, just spice justice." The Mughal Empire had a long-standing tradition of punishing market fraud with poetic irony. If you sold watered-down rosewater, you'd be forced to bathe in sewage. If you mislabeled your cardamom, you'd wear garlic paste in your armpits for a week. Real infractions, real consequences. Historians debate whether these punishments were codified laws or just clever social enforcement, but one thing's clear: they worked. No one wanted to be the chili man. The procession continues, and you follow like a curious ghost, barely believing this is how imperial justice worked. Less blood, more shame, more puns. Suddenly, a bell rings from a balcony. Everyone freezes. A guard unrolls a scroll and shouts, "Let it be known that Sadiq the Weaver has been sentenced to the backward ride for mislabeling cotton as silk." May the donkey not trip, may the shame be soft. The crowd cheers. Sadek appears, escorted by two giggling boys who are clearly enjoying their role a little too much. One of them carries a trumpet made of bamboo and blows it off-key every few steps. The other sprinkles rose petals, wilted ones. The donkey, possibly the same one as before, looks bored. This time, the offender's punishment is even more theatrical. He's wearing a tunic with swatches of actual silk stitched to the front and scratchy jute on the back. He is instructed to feel the difference with every breeze. Yusuf leans in. One time, a man lied about owning a mango orchard. They made him wear a costume shaped like a mango for 2 days in the heat. I nodded slowly. Why not just fine people, you whisper. Yusuf shrugs. Gold disappears. Embarrassment echoes. There's even a punishment for skipping the punishment. If you tried to bribe your way out of a donkey ride, you'd get double the route and a squeaky toy tied to your ankle. Legend has it that one noble's daughter tried to substitute a fake donkey, stuffed and mounted on wheels. The emperor himself laughed, then sentenced her to push it through the bazaar, while people pelted her with overripe dates. You laugh quietly, then remember where you are. The day ends and the procession disperses. The donkey, probably dreaming of a quieter career, clops off towards the stables. Sadek is released with a sneeze and a hiccup, both involuntary. You head back towards the city, dust clinging to your skin, the smell of chili still in your lungs. No bruises, no torture, just the heavy weight of witnessing justice from a donkey's point of view.
You spend the night on a rooftop, curled beneath a woven blanket that smells faintly of turmeric and mothballs. The stars flicker above you like gossiping courtiers, twinkling, unreliable. Sleep doesn't come easily. Maybe it's the memory of those squeaky shame slippers. Maybe it's indigestion. Maybe it's the vague sense that someone somewhere is sharpening a chili. Morning arrives with no ceremony. The sun spills over the sandstone walls, and the whole city begins to shimmer in the heat like it's trying to sweat out its sins. You make your way, rather warily, toward the North Quarter, where whispers say the cool punishments happen. A misnomer, as it turns out. The first thing you see is a man sitting in a shallow pit. His feet are bare, sunk into icy water drawn from the Yamuna River. Not unusual for midwinter, but it's July. The water's not cold now. The memory is the punishment. They call this the chilblain pit. Once a preferred sentence for petty bureaucrats who lost important documents or misplaced seals, the punishment involved standing in ankle-deep freezing water, sometimes for hours, sometimes for a full day. You couldn't sit, you couldn't move, and the worst part? You had to recite legal codes the whole time, loudly. During winter, frostbite was common. During summer, it was just absurdly uncomfortable. But the ritual humiliation stuck regardless. The current occupant of the pit had botched a grain inventory. A small mistake, technically, but in Mughal India, grain meant life. So now he sits, repeating, rice must be counted, rice must be weighed, rice must not disappear. A few children stand nearby, mocking him with their own renditions. Rice must be buttered, rice must be tossed, rice must be delicious. He sighs and adjusts his posture. You edge away and stumble, quite literally, into the next sentence being served. Smoke. Not incense, not sweet, not comforting. No, this smoke
burns. A man kneels nearby, his head inside a clay dome with 2 holes at the base. From one side, a pipe directs a slow stream of chili smoke into the enclosure. From the other, air wheezes out, thick and red and acrid. His eyes are shut tight. His nose is dripping. His punishment? He insulted a poet during a royal reading. You're told this is the smoke jar, used on those who spoke when they shouldn't, particularly during solemn or ceremonial events. It was invented, they say, during Jahangir's reign, by a courtier tired of being interrupted mid-sonnet. Rather than floggings or silence, they chose irritation. The dome design traps the chili smoke just long enough to water your soul through your sinuses. Historians still debate whether this was used in imperial circles or only in certain princely states. Some argue it's apocryphal. Others cite scrolls that reference domes of reflection. Either way, the scribe gets the last laugh. A fringe tale you overhear from a flower seller nearby involved a young girl who wouldn't stop humming in the mosque courtyard. She was punished by being made to walk through town with her lips painted in gold leaf and a parrot perched on her shoulder. The parrot was trained to mimic her hum for 2 weeks. The people were delighted. She was less so. Back on the street, a line begins to form beside a palace wall where a single nail protrudes, marking the site of the spice post. Here's how it worked. Offenders had to press their foreheads against the post, nose directly above a small pouch of crushed black pepper and mustard seeds. Every time they inhaled, sneeze. Every time they moved back, a soft tap from the guard stick. You watch a merchant, eyes streaming, murmuring apologies between sneezes. I mislabeled cardamom. I knew it. I'll never do it again. A scholarly debate once centered around whether this method had roots in Ayurvedic practices or was simply crafted by an imaginative spice trader with a grudge. Either way, it left the offender teary-eyed and deeply contemplative. You duck into a shaded alley to escape the olfactory assault and bump into a small group of students seated in a half-circle. They're observing a man with what looks like a garland of dried chili pods around his neck. His fingers are dipped in bright yellow turmeric paste, and every few seconds he must tap his nose, then recite a verse. I taste the heat of my tongue's sin, for words too sharp and poorly spun. Turns out, he wrote satire about the emperor. Satire, as it happens, was legal, but unfunny satire was a punishable offense. So here he is, spiced and shamed. Every time he flubs the verse, one student whispers, they rub tamarind on his lips. That's weirdly specific. You take note. Clever wordplay? Fine. Lazy rhyme? Chili time. Even the Mughal jails, you learn, sometimes participated in the spice games. One low-security cell had a reputation. Prisoners who complained too much about food were fed dishes with deceptive spice levels. One day it's bland. The next, enough heat to ignite your pancreas. A fringe report from a British merchant, questionably reliable, described a punishment involving red chili paste smeared on the soles of the feet, then followed by enforced walks on hot cobblestone paths. The result? A dance of regret. You pause at a tea stall. The vendor, an elderly man with twinkling eyes and turmeric-stained fingers, gestures for you to sit. You knew? He asked. You nod. He leans in. If they ever offer you the lemon trial, refuse it. You ask what that is. He laughs softly. They shave your eyebrows, make you hold a lemon between your teeth, then parade you past every unmarried girl in the district. If even one laughs, you're sentenced again. You blink. What's the second sentence? He whispers, hot mango chutney. You don't want to know where. He pours you tea and winks. You sip, grateful for something not covered in chili dust. The day winds down. From the distance, you hear a drum roll. Another backwards donkey, probably. Someone else learning the delicate line between flavor and felony. And as you stretch your aching legs, you realize Mughal punishments weren't meant to maim. They were designed to make you remember. Even if the only thing you remembered was to sneeze quietly.
The next morning, as you rub your aching calves, possibly still inflamed from watching other people suffer, you hear a commotion near the emperor's pavilion. Today's punishments are said to involve nobles, which means jewelry, drama, and the kind of ego wounds that leave permanent marks. You make your way through the crowded garden walkways, ducking under fig leaves and around hawkers selling gooseberry candy. The crowd thickens. People murmur as two palace guards emerge, holding what look like elaborate golden crowns. But then you notice, they aren't real gold. They're painted clay, poorly, gilded with copper flecks and dried honey to mimic luster. The craftsmanship is intentionally ridiculous. Jagged points, uneven designs, too big to wear comfortably. These are the infamous crowns of hollow honor. You squint at the noblemen standing nearby, clearly the intended wearers. One is already weeping. The other's mustache is trembling with repressed fury. Here's the backstory. During Shah Jahan's rule, it became common to punish court officials who made false boasts or took credit for others' work by forcing them to wear these mock crowns in public. Their names were announced, and they were told to stand proud in the central court under the hot sun for hours. The crown's weight? Exaggerated, usually 5 to 10 pounds, enough to strain the neck. Over time, posture broke down, dignity melted. One man, legend has it, tried to wear his with pride until a bird landed on it and relieved itself. The crowd applauded. His political career ended the next day. You watch now as the two officials are fitted with their honors. The taller one stumbles slightly. A servant rushes forward with a pillow, not for comfort, just to make the stumble look intentional. Historians still argue whether these crowns were ever used on generals. Some claim the military class was exempt from humiliation-based punishments, while others insist that during Aurangzeb's reforms, even generals faced the occasional headpiece of shame, a clay turban here, a painted helmet there. Yusuf, your ever-informative shadow, appears again. That one, he says, pointing to the sniffling noble, claimed to have invented a new irrigation system. It flooded 6 villages. Now he's the Rain King. Sure enough, his crown has tiny sun-shaped decals glued to it, a mocking ode to his brilliance. The second noble, you learn, miscounted revenue reports for Bengal. He blamed his scribes. They blamed his wine. He's now the scribe slayer, according to the paper banner fluttering behind him. But it's not just men who wear shame. A few steps away, under a shaded canopy, a high-ranking woman is being quietly fitted with a necklace made entirely of toy coins. Wooden discs, painted gold, strung on cheap twine. Her crime? Bribery during dowry negotiations. She must walk a slow circle around the palace gardens, head held high, while musicians play the same off-key flute melody every 2 minutes. The same one that plays during puppet shows. It's designed to attract attention and confusion. A fringe tidbit floats into your brain. Under Empress Nur Jahan's patronage, women's punishments were often more symbolic than physical.
They'd be gilded, dressed in exaggerated finery made from paper, tin, or feathers. The punishment? Public display. Ornate shame. You remember a tale Yusuf told earlier about a noblewoman who had conspired to poison her rival's enemix, resulting in orange fingernails instead of deep red. Her punishment? 2 weeks of wearing mittens shaped like teapots in July in Lahore. Meanwhile, a young clerk is now brought forward. His tunic is soaked, part sweat, part shame. He forged a minister's signature on a vacation request. He was caught because he spelled vacation wrong. His sentence? To wear a cloak stitched with every error he's ever made. Literally. Lines of failed handwriting, misspelled names, and mangled Persian script. The cloak is called the robe of regret. As he's paraded past the audience, a court poet reads the errors aloud, dramatically, with the tambourine. You glance around. Some people look amused, some people look bored. One woman nods as if remembering her own robe days. Maybe she's in remission. The Mughal obsession with poetic justice extended even to their punishments. You couldn't just be jailed. You had to be made part of the story. A walking cautionary tale, a decorative footnote in someone else's cautionary anecdote. You see one such tale now carved into a stone relief beside the garden path. It shows a man holding up a massive crown, his knees buckling. Beneath it, may the neck that lies never lift again. The irony? No one remembers the man's name. Another fringe tale. One noble, tired of his heavy shame crown, tried to bribe the jeweler into replacing it with a lighter version. He was caught. His new punishment, a hollow double crown, twice as large, painted with the words, King of Kings of Cowards. Yusuf chuckles at the memory. He tried to fake neck pain, got sentenced to the cushion of cowardice. What's that, you ask? It's a pillow, sewn into his robe. People thought it was a growth. The breeze picks up. A servant chases after a blown-off crown. The taller noble has slumped entirely now, crown lopsided, ego leaking visibly. You sip the rose water someone hands you. The scent is divine. The moment, surreal. You realize that in this empire, justice isn't always about pain. Sometimes it's about posture. The way your spine curves under the burden of your own ridiculousness. You wonder if your time is coming. If there's a hat, a robe, a clay coin necklace with your name on it, or worse, a jingle bell for that sneeze. You straighten your shoulders, just in case someone's watching. You find yourself drawn toward a hushed crowd near the eastern courtyard, where a small arena-like structure stands surrounded by white marble railings and rows of expectant onlookers. Something is happening, something you haven't seen yet, but you can feel it in your ribs, that odd cocktail of curiosity and dread. A young boy selling roasted chickpeas leans over and whispers, "It's elephant court today." You blink. "Excuse me?" He nods, wide-eyed. "The royal elephants are picking justice." You push forward, nudging past silk-robed nobles and gossiping musicians until you reach the inner circle. There, standing regally in the center, is Rani, the emperor's favorite elephant. Draped in velvet cloth, with her tusks painted gold and her ankles jingling with bells, she stands still as a statue, until a man is dragged into view, flailing like a broken marionette. His name, you're told, is Malik, the former head of the jewel caravan, who supposedly skimmed off several rubies during a delivery to Kashmir. The case is murky. Some say it was a setup by his rivals. Others swear he hid gems inside figs. Either way, he's now at Rani's mercy. In the Mughal Empire, elephants weren't just royal pets or war machines. They were judges, executioners, testers of fate. Here's how it works. 2 buckets are placed before the elephant. One filled with sweets and saffron rice, the mercy option. The other, containing leather straps and iron rods, the punish bucket. Whichever bucket the elephant touches first, that's the sentence. And yes, this is real. Historians have documented dozens of such ceremonies, especially during the reigns of Akbar and Jahangir. Some argue it was spectacle over substance. Others insist the elephants were trained to interpret subtle gestures from their handlers. Still others claim the elephants simply liked rice more than punishment gear, but not always. A fringe account from an Armenian merchant tells of an elephant named Shamshera, who had a particular grudge against jewel thieves. Supposedly a jewel had once been hidden in her feed, and ever since she never forgave those who touched jewels. Malik falls to his knees as Ronnie sniffs the buckets. The crowd holds its collective breath. She hesitates. Her trunk waves. And then she taps the bucket of sweets. The crowd murmurs with delight. Some clap. Malik sobs audibly, collapsing in gratitude. But he's not off the hook just yet. Mercy in this court doesn't mean free. It means symbolic pain. Ronnie is led forward and gently knocks him down with a slow nudge of her head. It looks like a hug from where you're standing, but then she pins him, lightly, with her foot, just enough to keep him in place. A court poet steps forward and begins to recite Malik's prime in rhymed couplets. For every verse, Ronnie gives him a nudge. At the end, she lifts her foot and trumpets once. He is released, slightly bruised, emotionally obliterated. Later you learn this was one of the lighter punishments. In other cases, elephants were used for physical chastisement, light trampling, symbolic tosses, even mock chases through courtyards, while offenders wore squeaky sandals and bells. No fatal blows, just enough to leave you with a limp and a reputation. In the worst cases, reserved for murderers or conspirators, elephants would be fitted with sharpened shoes or instructed to perform a judicial stomp. These were rare, but real, and terrifying. You hear whispers about an infamous case where a noble who attempted to assassinate a vizier was flattened like naan bread, as one vendor colorfully puts it. But back to today. Another offender is brought forth, a musician named Asif, who it is said plagiarized a sacred melody and used it in a love song, The Scandal. He's been sentenced to the drum parade. An empty barrel is strapped to his back like a giant shell, and small children are handed mallets. Asif must march through the court while they tap out rhythms of shame behind him. It's not painful, just mortifying. You trail behind as the procession begins. Every step Asif takes is punctuated by a soft thud, thump, thud. The children giggle. One girl improvises a beat that sounds suspiciously like a dance tune. Yusuf appears at your side again, munching on a pickled mango slice. They say Asif rhymed beloved with David. He shudders theatrically. He deserved the barrel. You marvel again at the Mughal sense of proportion. A bad lyric could earn you a public drumming. A crooked merchant, a nudge from a tusked judge. Murder? That one I admittedly was a bit more final. But even capital punishment wasn't always without flair. You overhear a story about a man who poisoned a royal falcon. Instead of the sword, he was sentenced to wear feathers, hundreds of them, glued to his robes. He became known as the walking peacock. Children chased him through the city, chanting bird calls. He died of shame or heat stroke, possibly both. You glance toward Ronnie, now being led away with garlands draped over her back. She seems content, perhaps satisfied with her judicial performance. Historians still debate the ethics of elephant courts. Was this justice? Theater? A primitive lie detector test with tusks? You're not sure. But you do know one thing. If you're ever called to court again, bring Ronnie some extra rice, just in case. As the drums fade behind you and the crowd disperses, you look back at Malek, still weeping softly in the corner, cradling the sweets he's been gifted as a token of royal mercy. It's a strange world, the Mughal world, one where elephants decide guilt, poets recite sentencing, and your fate might just depend on your taste in rhymes. You exhale slowly and step away, careful not to rhyme anything out loud. You wander away from the arena, ears still ringing with the drum parade and Ronnie's final trumpet. Your feet carry you through narrow lanes lined with perfume sellers and pawn vendors into a quieter part of the city, where the scent of rose attar floats thick in the air. It's disorientingly sweet, the kind of aroma that makes you feel like you've stepped into a giant wedding cake. And that's where you find them. 3 women sitting silently beneath a shaded pavilion, their heads bowed, their clothes immaculate, their faces unreadable. Above them, hung from the rafters, are strings of tiny perfume bottles, hundreds of them, each labeled with names like Rose of Regret, Musk of Lies, and Vanilla Disgrace. You've stumbled upon the aftermath of one of the Mughal Empire's most peculiar punishments, the scent of shame. These women aren't prisoners. They aren't even formally charged with crimes. What they are, according to the quietly murmuring crowd, is guilty of whispering. Specifically, whispering scandalous gossip inside the imperial Zenana, dangerous words, slander about concubines, speculation about heirs, a comment about someone's too tight sari. In any other place, it would be a passing offense. In the Mughal court, a potential political grenade. So they were sentenced not to silence, but to scent. Their punishment, to sit in the center of the city's busiest bazaar for 7 days, wearing strong, almost overwhelming perfumes with mocking names that signal their offenses. The fragrances aren't random, they're custom blended, symbolic, each scent chosen to evoke a particular mood, cloying regret, bitter envy, or syrupy flattery. You approach quietly, watching as a small boy, perhaps an apprentice perfumer, adjusts one woman's sash, spritzing her with a scent called Whispers Turn Sour. She flinches. The scent is sharp, floral, but with a bitter undertone, like orange blossom rolled in mustard seed. The crowd walks by, some stopping to sniff, others just to stare. One man pretends to sneeze, another offers a knowing nod. This punishment doesn't require stocks or shame signs. The perfume does the talking. Historians still argue whether this particular ritual originated during Nur Jahan's influence or whether it was the innovation of courtly women enforcing social codes. Some say it was about power. Others say it was hygiene propaganda dressed as justice. A few believe it was simply too memorable not to continue.
Yusuf finds you again, chewing cardamom. He gestures at the scene. Those three, one of them said the Empress's parrot was secretly trained to spy on ministers. You raise an eyebrow. It wasn't, he adds, but now everyone wonders. In a fringe tale told by an old eunuch nearby, you learn of a man sentenced to wear a necklace of tiny perfume vials for falsely accusing his wife of infidelity. Each vial was labeled with virtues she supposedly lacked: loyalty, grace, temperance. He had to refill the bottles daily while reciting apologies in rhyme. One day, he fainted from the overwhelming scent of sandalwood and clove. When revived, he renounced lying forever. In this part of the city, shame wears silk and smells like a rose garden in distress. You turn a corner and encounter another punishment, quieter but no less creative. A man with silver paint streaked through his beard is sitting at a desk, tongue protruding slightly, lead weight balanced on it. It looks uncomfortable. A scribe stands nearby, holding a feathered pen and reading verses aloud. Every time the man interrupts or rolls his eyes, the weight is pressed a little harder. This is the tongue trial, used mostly for slanderers, jesters who took things too far, or anyone who mocked the vizier's beard. Which, as it happens, was a frequent occurrence. You learn that this offender wrote a satirical play that implied the emperor's favorite general used coconut oil to maintain his muscles. The general was not amused. As punishment, the playwright must balance this weight for 1 hour while being read his own work aloud. And here's the twist. Every time the audience laughs, the weight increases. A child giggles. A guard smirks. The weight goes up. The writer sighs, tongue twitching slightly. Perhaps regret tastes metallic. Yusuf leans close and whispers, "There was a guy once, poet, brilliant. He wrote a whole satire about taxes. Too clever. The vizier ordered this punishment for 6 days. Now he only writes gardening manuals." Another fringe detail. In rural areas, the tongue punishment was sometimes replaced by the spoon trial, where the offender had to hold a spoon of honey on their tongue without swallowing while listening to a recitation of their misdeeds. If the honey spilled, extra punishment. If they swallowed it, public tusks from the court. Honey, as it turns out, was often used to measure dignity. Further down the lane, you spot a man on a bench, repeatedly reciting verses that seem aggressively complimentary. You catch phrases like, "Your honor drips like mango from heaven," and "O beard, glorious thicket of wisdom." He's part of the flattery correction program, a delightful Mughal invention wherein chronic flatterers were forced to recite ridiculous, saccharine praise until they hated the sound of it. A sign hangs around his neck, "Over-flattered a minor officer." Even the most verbose courtiers broke under the weight of too many mango similes. You can't help but wonder, was this a justice system or a performance? Maybe both. Historians often note how the Mughal elite used art, scent, and poetry not just for celebration, but for correction. Offenses were turned into stories. Crimes became fables, and everyone involved, victim or villain, walked away as part of a larger cultural memory. You drift back towards the bazaar, the scent of regretful rose still clinging to your sleeve. You pass the whispering crowd, the feathered scribe, the compliment-shouting flatterer, and you think, quietly, about what scent you might wear if your thoughts were suddenly made public. Probably something citrusy. You pick up your pace, just in case someone's blending something new.
As you turn away from the perfume-drenched corner of the bazaar, a sharp clang echoes from the nearby plaza. A new punishment is underway, and this one seems louder, more theatrical, less fragrant. You find yourself drawn toward the noise like a sleepy moth toward a bonfire of bad decisions. At the center of a stone platform stands a squat, nervous-looking man in an ill-fitting robe. His head is bowed, his hands tremble, and on a table in front of him, 3 heavy-looking lead discs, shaped like oversized coins with holes at the center. A crier announces, "Let all behold Basir the clerk, who mocked his vizier's beard in prose." There's a collective "ooh" from the crowd. Mocking a beard, as you've now gathered, is second only to sneezing near sacred scrolls in terms of career-ending missteps. Today's punishment, the tongue weight trials again, but this time you'll see the full version. Basir is made to kneel, and his tongue is gently pulled out and placed through one of the coin-like weights. It hangs awkwardly, pulled forward like a sad pink flag. He is then instructed to recite the very passage he wrote, loudly and without error. That's the twist. If you stumble, the weight increases. His first attempt begins well. "O beard of glory, curled like rivers of dusk." But then he flubs a line. He says bristle instead of shimmer. A scribe gasps. A guard snickers. The next disc is applied, heavier. Basir winces. You watch, fascinated and vaguely horrified, as he attempts the second stanza. His voice is mushy now, almost cartoonish. The words become barely intelligible, but the audience seems to love it. Mughal punishments often balanced humiliation with performance. If you embarrassed yourself well enough, sometimes the sentence was shortened. Failed to entertain, you stayed longer. Historians still argue whether these tongue trials originated in Persia or were adapted from ancient Sanskrit rituals involving vows of silence. Some claim the lead weights were metaphorical at first, later made literal for effect. Yusuf appears beside you again, as if summoned by awkward situations. I heard once a man insulted the royal librarian's breath. Had to wear clove pods in his cheeks for a week. Couldn't speak at all. Did it help? You asked. His breath, maybe. His job? Definitely not. Another tale emerges. A poet named Farid, who wrote a satirical epic comparing the emperor's prized stallion to a sneezy donkey. The work was brilliant, but the offense? Legendary. His punishment was unique. Every morning he had to stand outside the royal stables and recite apologies to the horses, in rhyme. Back to poor Basir. His tongue now droops under a third weight. He looks like a sun-dried frog. A court musician suddenly begins playing a gentle tambourine beat, underscoring the rhythm of Basir's suffering. The crowd sways. Children laugh. You start to realize something important. This isn't just punishment, it's entertainment, a civic opera of mistakes. And then comes the strangest part. Once Basir completes the final line, barely coherent, tongue limp, pride shattered, the guards remove the weights. He's handed a spoonful of honey, a clean cloth, and a choice. He can either return to work under a new, less humiliating title, Assistant Copy Scribe 6th Class, or become a ballad warden. What's a ballad warden? You whisper. Yusuf grins. I have followed other offenders and sing what they did wrong.
Oh. Naturally, Basir chooses the warden route. Maybe he's into revenge. As he limps off stage, you turn your attention to the next performer, a criminal. A man in brightly colored robes is ushered forward by 3 children, each carrying wooden musical instruments. The sign hanging around his neck says, "Tried to bribe a palace dancer." He's sentenced to participate in the Mughal musical parade. Here's how it works. The offender must dance through the court while the children play offbeat rhythms behind him. If he stops dancing, they blow whistles. If he stumbles, someone throws rose petals at him while shouting bad rhymes. He begins. Awkward shuffle, awkward twirl. The flute squeals behind him. "Briber, scriber, look at this wobbly dancer!" shouts one of the kids. It's both adorable and deeply uncomfortable. A fringe tale comes to mind. A tax officer once caught exaggerating quotas was made to lead an entire market in a choreographed dance called the chappa twirl. The move involved spinning while slapping your own sandal against your palm. He performed for 2 hours. Now, the dance is still used during festivals. Kids think it's hilarious. Historians just shake their heads. Another oddity, court musicians themselves were never punished musically. Instead, if they committed offenses, they were sentenced to rhythmic silence, forced to sit in the music hall during performances with cotton in their ears, hands tied to prevent clapping. Torture for a true artist. Yusuf tells you of a man who tried to plagiarize a temple hymn and sell it as an original lullaby. His punishment? Publicly rocked in a giant cradle while the crowd sang off-key nursery rhymes at him. Back in the plaza, the musical punishment wraps up. The briber dancer bows awkwardly, people applaud. It's unclear whether they're clapping for justice or entertainment. Maybe both. And then, silence. A gong rings once, twice, 3 times. A messenger steps forward, holding a scroll with shimmering silver ink. "The emperor invites all citizens to tomorrow's brick ceremony, in which 4 offenses shall be corrected with sacred construction." People murmur with delight. You turn to Yusuf, now nibbling on dried jackfruit. "What's the brick ceremony?" He smiles. "Oh, that's a good one. You'll see." You squint. "Will there be chili smoke?" "Nope, just bricks, sugar, and maybe a few bruised egos." You sigh. In this city, even building materials come with poetic consequences.
The next morning, you're jostled awake by a gentle whack from a broomstick. A woman with a clay mask on her face and a bundle of sweet limes in her arms scowls at you. "You're blocking the sugar procession," she mutters. You blink. The what? Within minutes, you're swept into a curious parade of sweet vendors, town scribes, and a trio of drummers wearing aprons made from grain sacks. Everyone's heading to the brick ceremony. As you walk through alleys laced with sandalwood smoke and the faint scent of boiled jaggery, you begin to notice people lining up along the perimeter of a massive open square. At its center, a short wall has been constructed, not for defense, but display. On top of this wall rest exactly 9 bricks, each painted a different color. This is Mughal justice at its most theatrical. And today's theme? Punishments by material and melody. A crier standing atop a milk crate begins to read. "Let it be known, 4 citizens shall now face redress for their civic misdeeds, not with blood, but with bricks and songs." Bricks and songs. Oh boy. The first offender is called forward, Sultan the Surveyor. His crime? Falsifying land boundaries in a village outside Lahore. Minor on the imperial scale, but devastating locally. His punishment? He must carry 5 bricks, painted bright red, across the square, balanced on his back like a crawling camel. The bricks are hollow but bulky. Each has a label: dishonor, deceit, distraction, displacement, and duh for being obvious. As he begins his crawl, a group of singers follows him, chanting verses that rhyme awkwardly but hit the point. Mark not what isn't yours to claim, or bricks shall carry forth your shame. One child in the crowd points and whispers, "Look, it's the brickback beetle." Nicknames were as durable as the punishments themselves. Historians debate the origins of this practice. Some say Akbar introduced it after reading Persian poetry about bearing one's burden. Others claim it came from village justice traditions, where materials were used to punish theft from construction sites. Either way, it's hard to look dignified with "duh" strapped to your shoulder blades. Next up, Rafika, the sugar merchant. Her sin? Hoarding sugar during a recent price surge, only to sell it back triple-priced during Eid. The punishment? Sugar ban. She is forbidden from consuming, touching, or being near any sweet substances for 1 full month. But it doesn't stop there. To reinforce the lesson, she is now paraded past 20 stalls offering free desserts that she cannot taste. She wears a necklace made of dried sugarcane sticks and a sash that reads, "Too sweet to trust." Every time someone offers her a laddu or piece of candied fig, she must respond with, "Thank you, but I have enough regrets." A fringe tidbit: there was once a man who tried to bypass this sugar ban by licking honey off his fingers in private. He was caught. The new sentence was 2 weeks of tasting bitter neem paste 3 times daily. His taste buds never recovered. As Rafika walks past the stalls, vendors taunt her with creative offerings: pistachio pastries shaped like coins, tamarind sweets rolled in powdered sugar, even syrup-drizzled roses. One particularly cruel seller tosses a rasgulla into the air and catches it in his mouth with theatrical flair. Rafika sighs. Her dignity holds, barely. Yusuf leans in. They once punished a greedy tax collector by letting him smell sugar for days. He started hallucinating gulab jamuns floating in his soup. You shake your head. Sweet justice, indeed. Next up, a lazy city record keeper named Hamza. His punishment? The musical chair gauntlet. It's not what you think. There are no chairs. Instead, he is forced to walk a narrow alley lined with palace musicians. Each one plays an instrument badly. He must identify every instrument correctly. If he misnames one, he is pelted with parchment scraps containing all the documentation he forgot to file. This is Mughal bureaucratic shame. First sound, a warbiting flute. Hamza guesses, pungi. Correct. Applause. Next, a wobbly beat on a stretched drum. Nagara? Incorrect. It's a tabla. 3 scrolls of forgotten trade reports are thrown at him. By the end of the alley, he's covered in dusty documents, one stuck to his forehead. His final task? To sing his daily schedule correctly. Rise at 6, file by 9, but I drank wine and lost track of time. He receives no applause. Historians still debate the effectiveness of musical punishments. Some say they relieved tension among overworked clerks. Others suggested they were invented solely to give bored musicians something to do during off-seasons. But everyone agrees they made errors more memorable. And finally, perhaps the strangest offender of all, a man named Kamer, who caught impersonating a royal astrologer to flirt with noblewomen. His star charts were nonsense. His predictions involved mango trees and rainbows. His punishment? He must now sit inside a large papier-mâché moon painted silver and dragged through the streets on a cart. A crier walks beside him, shouting,
Behold, the moon of misguidance. He predicted riches, but forecasted rotis. Calmer waves sheepishly from his lunar seat, dressed in robes stitched with fake constellations. One says Scorpio, another says, oops. Every hour he must recite a horoscope aloud for himself. You will encounter shame near midday. Your aura smells of regret and turmeric. A fringe tale tells of a similar offender forced to spend 3 nights in a makeshift observatory made of bamboo, required to chart the movements of pigeons and report their omens. The pigeons did not cooperate. As the brick ceremony draws to a close, the crowd claps politely. Vendors offer roasted peanuts. A small boy sells commemorative scrolls with illustrations of today's punishments. You buy one, because honestly, you might need a reminder of what not to do next time someone asks for your zodiac sign. You walk away from the square, the painted bricks fading behind you, the melody of misdeeds still ringing faintly in your ears. There's no such thing as a minor punishment here. Even sitting still can be turned into a public opera of awkwardness. You adjust your cloak, just in case someone decides your shoes are too loud.
The next morning, as the sun spills over marble rooftops and the sound of pigeons flapping against laundry lines fills the air, you find yourself wandering back toward the administrative quarter. You're drawn by curiosity, and perhaps the faint hope of a day without rhyming insults or powdered chilies. Foolish optimism. Because today's punishment has already begun, and it's a quiet, unnerving one. Punishment by perspective. You see it from across the garden, the tall, gilded frame set up like an art installation. A mirror. But not just any mirror. It's slightly convex, slightly tinted, and terribly distorting. A man stands before it now, trembling. His name is Ghulam, a former court clerk accused of petty theft and forgery. Nothing massive, just shaving off a few coins here and there, enough to matter. His punishment? To stare into the mirror of guilt. It warps his reflections subtly, not cartoonishly, just enough to make his posture look hunched, his eyes too close together, his face slightly off, as if something inside him had leaked outward. The idea is simple. You look like what you've done. It's not painful, it's psychological, and deeply effective. The mirror is flanked by 2 guards who ensure the offender doesn't look away for the full hour. Behind him, a small crowd gathers, watching his reactions more than his reflection. Every flinch, every swallowed sob is noted. Historians still argue whether these mirrors were actually enchanted or merely designed by clever glassmakers with a dark sense of humor. Some claim the distortion was variable, worse for greater crimes. Others insist the real punishment was knowing others were watching you see yourself. One fringe story tells of a vizier who stood in the mirror for 5 minutes before collapsing in tears, convinced it had revealed the demon inside him. Others claim he was just hungover. You edge closer, examining the strange instrument. It's oval-shaped, framed in gold leaf with tiny inlaid lapis lazuli stars. The bottom of the frame reads, "The face changes when truth arrives." Subtle, cruel, very Mughal. Yusuf appears beside you, because of course he does, munching on roasted chickpeas this time. They say if someone lies to themselves long enough, the mirror shows it. One guy saw his mother's face. You blink. His mother? You whisper. Yusuf nods gravely, and she was disappointed. The punishment isn't just passive staring. Every 10 minutes, a new observer steps forward to offer feedback. Poetic, of course. One woman, a potter, says, "Your hands were swift, but so was your lie.
Now your nose leans like truth trying to hide. Another, a musician, I see your guilt. It's swelling in your ears. Each line is met with a small chime, a courtly bell that marks emotional resonance. When the hour ends, Ghulam is quietly led away. He doesn't cry. He looks smaller. You're told he'll now spend the next week washing palace staircases, in silence, and without looking at his reflection in any surface. The penalty for sneaking a glimpse? Another hour with the mirror. As you walk away, the psychological weirdness still clinging to you like sandalwood smoke, you spot a new group being led into a shaded courtyard. 3 men, dressed identically in plain beige robes. All barefoot, all silent. They are victims of the unseen cage. What is it? A social punishment, invisible, insidious, ingenious. Here's how it works. These men are guilty of repeated verbal harassment of palace workers, crude comments, whispered suggestions, lewd jokes at the wrong time and in the wrong place. Their punishment? Total social erasure. They are not jailed, they are not beaten. Instead, they are released into society, where everyone has been instructed to ignore them. No eye contact, no speech, no reaction. They are ghosts, present, but erased. They can go to the bazaar, sit at a fountain, even enter a prayer hall, but no one will acknowledge them. Their names are removed from all rolls, their possessions temporarily held, their dignity stripped through absence. You watch as one of them, a bearded man with tired eyes, tries to speak to a vendor. The vendor looks straight past him. He knocks over a clay jug. No one blinks. He stumbles into a child. The child laughs, but then the mother whisks her away, avoiding his glance. This is a punishment of presence without participation. Yusuf speaks again, softly this time. The worst one lasted 42 days. The man started humming constantly, just to hear something. Eventually he stopped. Then he disappeared. Disappeared? No one ever found him. Some say he joined a Sufi order in disguise. Others say he's still walking the lanes, invisible. You feel a chill. No chains, no stocks, just silence. Historians rarely mention this punishment, perhaps because it left no scars, no paperwork, no poem. But it's whispered in the bazaars. The curse of no name. You hear a guard call out softly, "Next!" And just like that, a new man steps into the courtyard. His name will be erased. His voice will disappear. His shadow will remain. Back in the bazaar, you catch sight of a tailor offering reflections of virtue, mirrors said to correct your posture and your thoughts. The line is short. You wonder why. By the time you reach your cot that evening, your mind is heavy with imagery. A warping mirror, a man no one sees, a world where silence can be louder than punishment. You stare into a small bowl of water, just to check. Your reflection seems fine, but you avoid humming, just in case.
You awaken to the sound of rustling parchment and the gentle tap-tap-tap of a peacock feather quill against a wooden desk. The city is quieter this morning, but not peacefully so. It's the hush of anticipation, like the pause before a particularly awkward birthday speech. Today, the punishments come from the royal library. You enter a sun-drenched courtyard where scrolls are stacked like fortresses and inkpots gleam in tiny silver bowls. Scribes scurry about like anxious beetles, and in the center of it all stands a long, low table draped in silk. This, as you soon learn, is the setting for the peacock feather trials, a punishment designed not for warriors or merchants, but for scholars, scribes, and intellectuals who have betrayed the written word. Today's offender? Kashif ibn Rahman, once a respected historian, now found guilty of altering imperial chronicles to favor his patron. He didn't lie exactly, he just omitted some inconvenient massacres, added a few flattering metaphors, called one particularly disastrous battle a tactful seasonal retreat. His punishment begins with silence. He is seated on a cushion in front of an enormous sheet of parchment. His head is wrapped in a turban made entirely of peacock feathers, bright, shimmering, ridiculous. Two scribes sit on either side of him, dressed identically in brown linen robes, holding small bells. He is handed a quill, dipped in red ink. His task? To rewrite the official version of the events he distorted, but this time he must do it in couplets. Every time he drifts into flattery or excuses, a scribe rings the bell. He must stop and start again. The idea isn't to punish the fingers, it's to punish the mind. He hesitates before writing. You can almost hear his thoughts sparring. Should he use heroic withdrawal or tactical blunder? He chooses honesty. The bell stays silent. This ritual is part punishment, part public service. The corrected histories are stored as shadow scrolls, kept in a separate section of the library, not hidden, but clearly marked. Historians still argue about the existence of these scrolls. Some claim they were quietly destroyed during Aurangzeb's reign. Others say they were buried in the foundations of Fatehpur Sikri. A few romantics suggest they're still read by moonlight in secret libraries. As Kashif writes, a small boy approaches holding a silver bowl of ink. His duty? To collect any tears that fall from the punished scholar. Supposedly, these are used to mix the ink of remorse, a slightly grayer shade only used in footnotes and errata slips. Probably a myth. Probably. You learn of a fringe tale, a calligrapher who misspelled the emperor's name, by accident, or perhaps while drunk on rose wine. His punishment? Every morning for a week, he had to inscribe the name perfectly on grains of rice, with a needle. It said he lost all feeling in his fingers, but never forgot how to spell. Next to Kashif sits a different figure, older, more ragged, with streaks of ink across his robe. His punishment is quieter. He is being inked. Not tattooed, not permanently, but for 1 week, his palms, forearms, and cheeks will be marked with short excerpts from the false translations he published in a famous philosophical treatise. They are written in tiny, neat script, hard to read unless you look closely, but visible. He is called the walking footnote. You lean in. On his forearm, you can just make out, "Truth is what pays best." Yusuf appears beside you. He's always nearby when things get poetic. They used to do full-body inks, he says, lowering his voice. One guy copied holy texts and added jokes, got covered in verses from top to toe. They made him stand in the temple courtyard and chant, "My body is a scroll, my soul full of scribbles." You raise an eyebrow. Did it work? He became a baker. A guard calls out, "Next offender." A lanky, nervous-looking scholar steps forward holding a small book. It's bound in leather and titled, "On the Behavior of Stars." The crime? Plagiarism. Half the book was lifted from a Greek text, the rest, invented. His punishment? The reverse citation.
He must now read every paragraph aloud while crediting every source he failed to mention, whether real or fabricated. If he makes one up again, a court astrologer throws pebbles at his sandals. He starts reading, voice trembling. The moon affects tides, as first observed by Al-Biruni and noted by my cousin, and overheard at the spice market near Mathura. Pebble. He flinches. Yusuf chuckles. They once made a man cite his cook for a footnote on boiling water. Still unclear if it was satire or justice. Even the tools are punished here. One of the ink pots used in a falsified manuscript has been painted bright orange and now sits in a niche marked Dishonored Instrument. No one uses it. No one touches it. Except one brave squirrel who steals the quill beside it and immediately regrets it. Ink everywhere. You spend the afternoon wandering this odd place of quiet intellect and stern consequences. You find a bench near the shade and observe one final ceremony, the oath of ink. Here, newly appointed scribes must swear a vow by writing it on their own forearms. If they break it, if they twist truths, misquote sources, or insert flattery where none is due, they are made to wash it off publicly with bitter neem paste. You watch a boy of barely 15 write his oath with trembling hands. The last line reads, "Let my ink dry clean, or my shame stain long." He finishes. The parchment master nods. As the sun begins to set, the punished are slowly led away. The ink-stained man, the bell-racked poet, the plagiarist with sandal-pebble bruises. None are beaten, none are chained, but they look exhausted, because the mind, when cornered, writhes more than the body. You leave quietly, trailing the scent of old parchment and moral correction, wondering which is heavier, a guilty conscience or a head full of uncredited footnotes.
By now, you've grown accustomed to the rhythm of this strange world, a city where justice is scented, sung, spun into satire. But as the sun peeks over the eastern gate this morning, the tone feels different. Lighter, but somehow heavier, like a secret being held in cupped hands. Today you're granted rare entry to the Zenana, the secluded women's quarters of the palace, a realm shielded from the usual chaos of the Mughal courts. Here, judgment comes not in the form of public humiliation, but whispered correction and long, deliberate silence. As you step through carved marble screens into a courtyard blooming with night jasmine and shaded by neem trees, the first thing you notice is how quiet everything is. Then you see her, a young woman seated in the center of the garden, eyes downcast. Her name is Rahima. Her offense? Spreading private letters that weren't hers to share. But she's not chained, not marched, not doused in spices. Her punishment? Silken solitude. She is wrapped, quite literally, in silence. 3 layers of silk in translucent shades of violet and blue, draped over her body. Not heavy, but confining. Each layer represents one of the confidences she betrayed. The sheer fabric allows her to see shapes and light, but not expressions. She can hear voices, but not clearly. It's not blindfolding, it's distancing. And her duties? She must still move about the Zenana, tend to chores, join the group meals, but she may not speak. No one may speak to her directly. Her name is not to be spoken aloud. The punishment lasts 7 days. You sit quietly on a low-cushioned bench beside an elderly woman who hums softly while threading pearls.
She leans toward you and murmurs, "They call it soft justice, but sometimes it's harder than stones." Historians rarely recorded Zenana punishments, partly because men were not permitted to witness them. What we know comes from letters, poetry, and the occasional scribbled note from an eavesdropping servant. Some suggest that justice here was more psychological, more poetic, less about spectacle, more about soul weathering. You spot a second woman being gently led down a tiled path, barefoot. Her hands are stained with bright orange dye. At first you assume turmeric, but no, it's annatto ink, used for painting miniature portraits. Her crime? Forging a love letter, allegedly from a court poet, and using it to embarrass a rival. Her punishment? Memory etching. For the next week, she must write verses about trust, loyalty, and deception, using only her stained hands, no pens, just her fingers and natural dyes on rice paper. The result is smudged, swirling lines, fragments of remorse. Once complete, her writings are not destroyed. They are dried, stitched into small fabric pouches, and hung in the corners of the Zenana like faded lanterns. The verses are not read aloud, they simply exist, a quiet gallery of regret. You peer at one such pouch fluttering near the window. I tied the truth in knots, wove false words like thread. Now silence tucks me in nightly, while shame braids my hair. A fringe tale surfaces. One woman, a nobleman's third wife, was caught whispering predictions she claimed were based on dreams. In reality, she was bribing a cook for information. Her punishment? A year-long lunar silence. She could only speak during full moons. On the other days, she wore a silver thread around her wrist to signal her vow. It became a quiet legend among the palace maids. As you continue walking through the Zenana, you come across a shaded room filled with cushions, mirrors, and one lone woman seated cross-legged on a carpet. Her name is Shazia. She once insulted another consort's embroidery, comparing it to a bird's nest during monsoon. It sounds petty until you realize embroidery here is status, politics, reputation. Her sentence? Echo meditation. She must sit in this room for 2 hours each morning while a scribe reads aloud compliments she herself once received. Every single flattering remark, public or private, is repeated, then followed by a chime. She is not allowed to respond. The idea is to force her to sit with her former self, the celebrated version, the one she punctured with cruelty. Yusuf, whom you had assumed wasn't allowed here, somehow appears at your side. Maybe he's disguised as a eunuch today. His voice is hushed. They say one woman heard so many old compliments, she began to believe she'd died. You blink. She refused to speak after that, took up gardening, grows only night-blooming jasmine now. Outside, you pass a quiet fountain, surrounded by painted tiles, each bearing a word: grace, restraint, dignity, care. You're told these are the 4 threads, guiding principles of conduct in the Zenana. To violate one thread meant being unwoven. There's a punishment for that, too. The silent loom. A woman who insults or harms others emotionally may be sentenced to spend 7 days weaving cloth from dyed threads, but the pattern is pre-written for her. It's ugly, unbalanced,
garish colors. She must complete it anyway. And at the end, she's required to wear it for a day. You spot one such garish garment hanging from a clothesline, olive green against hot pink with clumsy golden tassels. The garment isn't ripped or burned. It's just remembered. That's how the Zenana disciplines, not through force, but permanence. By the time you exit the quarters, head low, sandals dusty, you feel something in your chest, a weight you hadn't noticed earlier. This was no parade of donkeys or mirrored shame. This was a world where every punishment was sewn into silence. Historians will debate the methods, the fairness, the sources. Some will romanticize, others will dismiss. But what you now understand is this: justice here wasn't about being seen, it was about feeling seen. And in that way, it might have been the most piercing of all.
You exit the Zenana with a strange hush trailing behind you, as if the silken silence of that secluded world has clung to your robes. Even the raucous calls of street vendors seem softened, as if the city itself is pausing for breath. But your respite doesn't last long. Because, as fate would have it, you're just in time for the start of another punishment procession. This one much more colorful. Literally. A young man is being marched through the streets wearing what can only be described as an explosion of peacock feathers, ink stains, and mild regret. Welcome to the realm of punishment by quill and color. The offender, Danish the scribe, was a talented, if overly ambitious, copyist assigned to replicate sacred texts for the palace archives. What he did instead was decorate them, lavishly, overly. Think marginal doodles of dancing monkeys and poems where there should have been plain dates. His defense? I thought it needed more flair. The Empire disagreed. So now he parades in public wearing a vest stitched with feathers and scroll fragments. On his back is painted, in large brush strokes, "I prioritized art over accuracy." Historians still debate the Mughal tolerance for artistic expression within record-keeping. Akbar was known to patronize miniaturists, but even he drew the line when court ledgers looked like children's books. The crowd watches with mild amusement as Danish is led to a temporary pavilion, a wide canopy strung with strings of dangling pens. Beneath it sits a basin of blue-black ink and a pile of cloth. Here's his punishment: ink reversal. He must now erase his own flourishes from copies of documents using a special paste made from lime and powdered eggplant skin. Then copy the texts again by hand in plain script under the supervision of a humorless clerk known only as the monotone. If he adds a flourish, even a well-placed comma that looks fancy, he starts over. Yusuf shows up, again, with a grin and a lemon pickle. "This is nothing," he says. "There was a guy once, an artist who painted the emperor with a smaller nose. They made him repaint it 47 times until it was the correct nose size. The last one still looked off. He was sentenced to draw donkeys for a year." Another fringe story: one calligrapher tried to impress a noble by blending cinnamon into his ink for a scented manuscript. It smelled lovely, but the ink bled. The words ran together. Now he smells of shame and writes only on papyrus. Back to Danish. He's given a feathered pen, dipped in watery dye, and told to sign 30 blank pages with the phrase, "Clarity before creativity." If his signature curls at the end, he does it again. Meanwhile, another offender is brought forward, a woman named Sadaf, formerly a royal archivist.
Her crime? Tampering with footnotes in a historical manuscript to elevate her grandfather's role in a minor skirmish. She changed "he fled the field" to "he rallied bravely." A small tweak, but words are sacred here. Her punishment? The scroll of correction. She is required to wear a wide scroll of parchment across her shoulders like a shawl. On it are written her edits, followed by the actual text, in 2 colors. Red for her, black for the truth. She must walk the courtyard slowly, once every hour, for 7 days. The scroll is not heavy, but the whispers are. A scribe mutters nearby, "She added a 3rd elephant to a 2-elephant charge. Everyone knows there were only 2. Mughal punishments thrived on the idea that shame should be proportionate, poetic, and, most importantly, memorable. In one infamous case, a scholar who overused metaphors in official documents was punished by having to compose a verse for everything he did for a week. Buying mangoes rhymed. Washing his feet rhymed. Greeting the guards rhymed. By day 3, he refused to speak altogether. Back at the pavilion, Danish has now successfully rewritten 5 pages. Plain, precise, dull. The clerk nods solemnly. Progress. But then the wind picks up, scattering some of his finished pages. A child grabs one, reads it aloud, and frowns. This is so boring. Exactly. Nearby, a final offender is presented. Farzana, a poetess and former court entertainer. Her offense? Inserting unapproved political commentary into her lyrical performances. Her sentence? Tattooed oath, but temporary. Using plant-based ink and a finely sharpened stylus, she must receive a series of swirling, decorative script tattoos across her arms, each bearing one of the 7 virtues of a court poet. Restraint, rhythm, respect, subtlety, precision, clarity, quiet fire. The tattoos will fade within a month, but during that time she may only perform poems that include at least 4 of those words. If she omits one, she is required to write a haiku about her error, in public, in front of the royal parrots. The parrots, you're told, are harsh critics. Yusuf leans in. They made one guy rhyme justice with mustard. The parrots attacked. Fringe-tail or not, you eye the birds now with suspicion. They do look judgmental. The day winds down, scrolls are rolled up, feathers are plucked from costumes, ink pots are sealed with wax. And the offenders? They don't leave in chains. They leave in quiet contemplation. Arms smudged, robes ink-stained, reputations slightly improved, slightly ruined. You pause before one of the parchment shawls hanging to dry. On it, a final verse. I wrote to please, not to preserve, but truth, it seems, has more reserve. You nod slowly. Maybe the Mughal Empire didn't just punish with pain or poetry. Maybe it punished with clarity. And nothing cuts deeper than being edited by history itself.
A soft drizzle mists the city this morning, turning the sandstone walls into streaky palettes of gold and rose. The marble paths gleam underfoot, and you tread carefully past vendors covering their baskets with scraps of burlap. There's a smell in the air, fresh earth, damp jasmine, and the unmistakable tension of retribution. Today, punishment returns to where few expect it, behind the latticed screens and velvet curtains of the imperial women's quarters. But this isn't the Zenana.
This is its mirror. Justice among noblewomen, yes, but not only courtesans and consorts. This is where wives of governors, daughters of viziers, and granddaughters of warriors reside. And with status comes judgment of a very specific variety. You are allowed entry only because today's event is public, a rare moment when consequences spill past walls. You slip into the side chamber of a mirrored hall where everything glows in coppery candlelight. And in the center, seated perfectly straight on a velvet stool, is a young noblewoman named Maha. She is elegant. She is composed. She is also terrified. Her crime? She wrote anonymous satirical poetry mocking the regional governor's wife. One verse described her gait as a frightened goose in pearls. Another compared her speeches to mango sap, sweet but sticky and hard to wash off. The poems became wildly popular. Unfortunately, the governor's wife has a sense of humor as delicate as undercooked lentils. So now Maha must face punishment by reversal. She will spend 3 days receiving praise, excessive praise, from everyone, even those beneath her status. She cannot reject it, cannot deflect it, and certainly cannot critique it. Why is that a punishment? Because it is unbearably awkward. Already 3 maids stand before her reciting floral compliments with increasing absurdity. Your eyes, 2 moons nestled in royal pudding. Your voice like warm butter spilled on prayer beads. Your toes 10 gentle commas in a poem of grace. Maha swallows. You see her fingers twitching. The 4th woman bows and says with alarming sincerity, "Your silence contains multitudes. I once understood politics better just by looking at your elbow." Maha breaks. She covers her mouth and lets out a muffled laugh. A bell rings. That's a strike. If she reaches 3, she'll be sent to the circle of revision, where she must spend a day rewriting her own poems as compliments instead of insults. The crowd is entertained. You can feel the tension, people shifting, eyes sparkling, waiting to see if she'll crack again. You learn this form of reversal was invented during the reign of Empress Nur Jahan, not to silence women, but to sharpen their awareness of how words could slice or soften. If used well, praise could become as sharp as satire. A fringe tale supports this. A woman once critiqued a general's wife's embroidery at court. Her punishment? She was honored with a parade of 100 women reciting verses praising her embroidery, publicly, for hours. The embarrassment was so potent that she never commented on needlework again. In the far corner, another woman, older and stoic, kneels before an altar of folded garments. This is Rukhsana, the disgraced keeper of the royal wardrobe. Her sin? She misassigned colors, accidentally matching the empress and a visiting queen in identical turquoise, a diplomatic disaster, apparently. Her punishment? Hue shame. She now wears a robe dyed with all the offending colors, mismatched, clashing violently, and must walk the corridors asking every woman what shade suits them best. Her goal? To relearn humility through forced compliments. The kicker? She has to carry a painted parasol that reads, "Chromatic Apology in Progress." Yusuf, disguised once more as a servant adjusting perfume trays, leans over and whispers, "One woman once wore green to a ceremony meant only for widows in white. Her punishment was to wear transparent fabric dyed with invisible ink, only visible in moonlight. It read, 'Let color guide wisdom.'" You ask, what happened to her? She married a poet, probably for the metaphors.
As the day moves on, you observe yet another strange trial. A young woman named Shamila, accused of breaking a sacred tea set during an argument, is seated before an audience. She holds a teacup, one of many, all cracked and mismatched. She must now perform the tea apology. She serves tea to every woman present, silently, carefully. And before each pour, she must whisper one lesson she has learned from the experience. Porcelain remembers anger. Sharp words chip more than ceramics. Tea doesn't taste right when pride brews it. The crowd murmurs approval. Historians rarely write of these rituals, not because they were minor, but because they operated outside the visible justice system. Self-contained, symbolic, scalding in ways that couldn't be recorded on scrolls. A final event begins as dusk paints the marble pink. The chair of composure is brought forth. It's a simple wooden stool, but the woman seated upon it, Zira, must sit still for an hour while her most bitter rivals read critiques of her from memory. She cannot flinch, cannot respond. Every twitch is marked. You once called yourself a river. You're more like a puddle after rain. You speak often of grace, yet you demand it more than you give it. You wore pearls to a mourning. We remember. She closes her eyes, breathes slowly. She makes it through the hour with only one eyebrow quirk. Impressive. As the women return to their quarters, their faces are unreadable. No stocks, no beatings, no feathers, and yet something sharper has passed through here. You step outside, back into the rain-slicked world of the public court. You glance over your shoulder at the curtained entrance. It's quiet. But you know what just happened behind those walls will be remembered longer than any donkey ride. Because sometimes the deepest punishments leave no mark.
The rain has stopped. The last droplets fall from palace eaves like melting time, and the evening hushes itself into something strangely sacred. You walk along the river's edge, where the Yamuna flows slow and brown and endless. The marble of the burning Ghats shines slick underfoot, as if recently wept upon. Here, amid the scent of wet ash and sandalwood, the final category of Mughal punishment is rendered: farewell at the burning Ghats. Unlike what you've seen before, this place isn't about humiliation or performance. It's about endings, and for some, not always literal death. A low bell tolls once, a second time, then silence. A small group of courtiers, guards, and silent witnesses gather near the Ghats' edge. At the center is an old man in ceremonial robes, not a criminal, but a former royal advisor. His crime? Breach of dying will. He was entrusted with an emperor's final private letter, meant only for his son. Instead, he opened it, read it, copied it, even whispered parts of it to nobles before the official funeral rites. Now, years later, the truth has come out, and though he's gray-haired and limping, the empire still believes in consequences. His punishment? The ash walk. He is to walk barefoot across the Ghats, scattering a small urn of cooled ashes as he goes. Not human remains, but parchment, shredded scrolls, scripts and pages, burned. The symbolic weight of all words misused, mishandled, misread. Every step he takes, a bell tolls, not for him, but for the trust that died. At the river's edge, he pauses,
recites a verse written for such moments. I held a secret in my palm, but squeezed too tight and crushed the calm. Now what once whispered soft and bright is ash that won't relight. Historians have long debated this practice. Was it real? Was it metaphor? Some say the ash walk was reserved only for those whose words corrupted the flow of imperial succession. Others believe it was entirely symbolic, a final chance for a man to walk away from the legacy he poisoned. You watch in reverent silence as the man completes his slow journey and is gently escorted away. Not to a prison, not to exile, but to the hall of the whispering flame, a small quiet chamber where disgraced scholars, advisors, and secret keepers live out their final years. No ink, no paper, just memory. There's a chilling beauty to it. You wander from the Ghats, following a torch-lit path to a smaller platform, where a second ceremony is underway, this one more theatrical. A nobleman stands at the center of a small raised dais, surrounded by actors, dancers, and singers. But this isn't a celebration. This is the last role. He was a court playwright who attempted to pass off old scripts as new, recycling metaphors, reusing plot twists, even plagiarizing a romantic monologue from a popular grain advertisement. His sentence? To write his own farewell performance, then perform it in full costume with a cast of junior poets who are permitted to correct him mid-sentence if he tries to embellish. As he performs, the audience laughs, not cruelly, but knowingly. I was a master of rhythm until I borrowed too many lines. Now my rhymes ring hollow, more echo than music. A child shouts, "You used that one last week." The actors stop. He bows. Correction accepted. The play ends. There's applause, sparse, respectful. You later hear that as part of his punishment, he must now serve as a silent stagehand for the next 12 festivals, handling props but never speaking a word. Justice through metaphor. A very Mughal finale. Nearby, a woman walks the Ghats slowly, her fingers dipped in gray ink. Her crime? Burning letters not hers to destroy. Her sentence? To paint ash-colored flowers on memorial walls for a full month. Each petal represents a broken trust. The walls are filling up fast. Yusuf arrives, somehow always knowing where you'll be. This is where the empire doesn't need crowds. Here, shame is personal. You nod. These are not punishments for laughter. These are the slow ones, the ones that rot the root. Reputation once golden, slowly flaked away like old gilt paint. You think of the mustard smoke, the donkey rides, the mirrored reflections, the sandals that squeaked guilt. But here, at the edge of fire and river, the only sound that matters is the whisper of wind through papyrus and the quiet plop of ashes sinking into water. These punishments don't shout. They linger. They hum. They remind you that empires are built on more than armies. They're built on stories, secrets, and how those are held or broken. You sit for a while, watching the final scrolls burn in a small ceremonial brazier. No names are spoken, no songs are sung, just a soft voice repeating the old Mughal farewell. Ash returns to ash, not in punishment, but in pause. And just like that, the final punishment dissolves into water into wind, into memory.
And now, as the night deepens and the flames at the Ghats flicker lower, your thoughts begin to drift. You feel the warmth of the stones beneath your feet begin to cool. The scent of sandalwood fades into something gentler. Faint jasmine, maybe, or the echo of rain long past. Your breath slows. The city of punishments, once bustling with rhyme and rhythm, now rests. The donkeys sleep. The mirrored halls darken. Even the ink pots are sealed and tucked away. You remember the jingling moustaches, the weight of hollow crowns, the scent of regret bottled into perfumes. You remember the silence of women woven into robes of consequence, and the feathered scribes bowed beneath poetic correction. And you let them all float gently away. Let the shame slippers fall silent. Let the peacock feathers settle. Let the bells stop ringing. Because tonight, none of those stories are yours to carry. You are not the one with ink-stained fingers or parrot-judged rhymes. You are not riding a donkey backward or staring into a truth-warped mirror. You are simply here, with the soft hum of a fan, the dim glow of a screen, and the gentle quiet of being safe. You made it through the Mughal Empire, every peculiar punishment, every poetic justice, and you did so with your dignity mostly intact. So, exhale, let your shoulders drop, let your eyes soften, and know this, even the empire sleeps now, and soon so will you.